We are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kirsten, and I am a board member for Drupal for Gov and part of the planning committee for Drupal GovCon. First, before we even get started, I just wanted to take a moment to remember James King, who was one of our founding members, and the primary reason we even have GovCon at all at this point. We lost James in the end of March this year, and it's been quite a difficult adjustment for us. And we will be talking soon about a scholarship fund that we're going to be starting in his honor. And without further ado, let's just get started with our keynotes. Again, it's been a sad year for us, and I hope you all keep James in your thoughts. So now to start with this year's keynotes. Thank you to Noel Hidalgo and Joseph Castle for speaking today. This room is called the CTAC room, and it will be used for our networking activities this week. So keep in mind that the Thursday schedule for this room includes an Aquia presentation tomorrow morning, a Promet Source presentation in the afternoon, one from Debug Academy, and then following up at the end of the afternoon at 4 o'clock with ITCon. Friday's schedule includes phase 2 in the morning. Sorry, I apparently now have lawn work getting done. Agiliana, Forum 1, and CTAC. The network opportunities will also provide a job board, which is in our Slack, and also our BOF room, which is almost full now. There are a couple of spots left. You can actually get that on the Birds of a Feather page. We also have socials this year, which you can check out on our socials page. Please be kind to one another and remember that we are enforcing our code of conduct. Take a look at it just as a refresher. In Zoom, use the closed caption button to turn live captionings on and off. Now, for a word from our sponsors.
Government is changing, and the bar of citizens' expectations is rising. Today, they're looking for more personalized and tailored experiences while interacting with government agencies. At Aquia, we bring digital experiences to life for the world's most ambitious organizations. And we are the only digital experience platform that's made for Drupal. Constituent data and agency applications often live in siloed systems and software applications like a CRM or other legacy database. Aquia integrates these critical systems to help build a 360-degree view of citizens and inform your digital marketing campaigns, maximizing your technology stack. Armed with those profiles, agencies can create automated and personalized messaging to guide citizens through a tailored information journey, ensuring they're exposed to the next best action, however they choose to engage. Over the life of a citizen's journey, our integrated solution leads to a holistic understanding of audiences' behavior across channels. Ultimately, this helps agencies make smarter decisions about their content and delivery.
BOMO is a full-service agency focused on creating elegant solutions to solve complex problems. At our core, we're dedicated to digital transformation for our clients, taking existing projects and ideas and developing them into fresh experiences that engage users. We build products for all manner of clients across the federal and commercial sectors, from award-winning apps like Pulse to high-performance news sites like Voice of America. Our dedicated teams focus on crafting the right solutions to meet every project's needs, whether that's high availability decoupled Drupal solutions like NASA.gov or custom e-commerce solutions for USGS, Mobomo has the expertise to help your organization develop and innovate the platforms and products that drive your business. For the 8th year in a row, Mobomo has landed on the Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies list, and we don't expect that expansion to slow down anytime soon. If you're interested in becoming part of our team, check out mobomo.com/careers.
Thank you again to our sponsors, Aquia, Debug Academy, Mobomo, CTAC, and again, Aquia for the captioning. We have a whole host of other sponsors as well, and please definitely check them out, from our training sponsors to our supporting sponsors, and of course, our contributors. At this point now, I'm going to introduce Noel Hidalgo and transfer it to him as our new co-host.
Hello, everybody. Let me start sharing my screen. Let's see here. And are you getting my screen at full screen?
Yes,
Thanks, Joseph. Great.
First, let me introduce Noel real quick. Noel is been working on BetaNYC City for the past, 10 years? 5 years?
Almost. Yeah, about 10 years.
And it is a driving force to improve New York City's use of technology and share its data. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Noel Hidalgo.
Great, thank you, Kirsten. It's a real pleasure to be back with the Drupal community. Just to show my loyalty, my water bottle is still Drupal blue. So my water is always blue. It's a real honor to be here. While I'm no longer as active as I once was in the Drupal community almost 15 years ago, it's a real pleasure to see the depth and breadth of this community, particularly within government. I'm going to speak a little bit about the history of kind of my relationship with Drupal, and then also talk about where kind of the Drupal community inspired me to do work within BetaNYC, and talk about kind of like the future that I think we all find ourselves in. Kirsten appropriately started us off with recognizing that we've lost many members of our community over the last 6 months. Our nation truly does mourn for the over 200,000 people lost to COVID, and the countless others that are permanently impacted by this pandemic. Within our community, we've lost several members within BetaNYC, and one of our staff members lost 3 family members in one household. We are living in unprecedented times between the rise for social justice, the pandemic and the healthcare crisis that it's creating, and then the economic crisis that's kind of that we are in the middle of, that we don't necessarily know where the walls are. What I want to talk about today is a little bit of inspiration, and how do we work through ourselves as a community in the age of COVID. So the fundamental question that I want to ask is, how do we move together when we're so far apart? I'm not sure how many of you know Jacob Redding, but I was fortunate enough to meet Jacob at Barcamp NYC 2, which was the second Barcamp in New York City. We were brought together because we both were members of a pretty diverse digital community here in New York City. We were privileged to take 2 days off and really kind of like immerse ourselves in this event. On top of that, we were given a space that had access. We were given a space where the doors were open, our shoes were off, and we could essentially explore. Jacob and I developed a fast and quick friendship because of the Drupal community. I was running Drupal meetups at the time period and needed to hand them off, and Jacob took up that banner. And so this photo is actually from the very first Drupal camp in New York City, which was the very first original Drupal camp, though it is known as Drupal Camp 2. Let me get back here to the screen. You know, just to think about this, that photo was from 2006. Our relationship predates Twitter. You know, it predates the hashtag. It predates the iPhone or the Apple Store. Through that journey, we were to use these technologies for good. In 2008, you know, this is kind of amazing, but we were able to use Twitter actually to do election protection. There were about 30 volunteers came together to build a system called Twitter Vote Report that was able to capture 50,000 tweets and create a workflow called Swift River that ensured a framework where people's problems at the polling site were matched with lawyers. We were able to use this upcoming technology to enhance our democracy. From that experience in those early days in 2008 and kind of the boom of the early Gov 2.0, Web 2.0 world, you know, we saw governments like the city of DC launch an apps competition that inspired, once the White House changed hands and the Congress changed hands, we saw this federal open government initiative. You know, this amazingly was the very first federal order that came out of the Obama White House. Back in 2009, you know, we had a collective mandate to provide transparency, to increase participation, and to honor our work and to be collaborative. Mind you, this whitehouse.gov is running on Drupal. And while the federal government was working on things, I was here in New York with an amazing group of hackers and activists and technologists and open source enthusiasts. And we turned around and converted our state Senate website into a Drupal website. This was a unique site for the fact that it gave every single state senator their own personal webpage. It gave them an opportunity to speak directly to their constituents. We also put all of the sessions online in a live streaming manner. We opened up our legislative book so that way the people of New York could see kind of the process of legislation. They could actually read the bills that were being introduced into the Senate. We were the first government body on GitHub. And our mandate was to ensure transparency, create efficiency within government, and to honor participation. So we created a bunch of tools that are still in place because we respected both sides, and we honored the commitments that people were willing to make in code and to democracy. You know, these things set a precedent here in New York City where, once again, you know, community innovation and collaboration could be harnessed through NYC Big Apps. And from those experiences, BetaNYC was born as a civic organization to improve the lives of New Yorkers using technology, data, and design. We focus explicitly on demystifying technology because so much of our professional work is really almost, it seems like magic to our community members. And we fundamentally want to increase their digital and data literacy so that way it's not seen as magic and they can understand really what are the nuances and some of the politics and the issues that are really embroiled within our software. I'm sure, as some of you know, elements of our government consider even open source to be politicized, and that there are certain factions of open source that's aligned with one party or the other. And in reality, you know, what we're trying to show is that we need to be all working together and use these three things, technology, data, and design, to ensure that we have a healthy and functional democracy for the 21st century. Our organization has 4 core values: the freedom to connect, the freedom to learn, the freedom to innovate, and the freedom to collaborate. And you know, we have this little journey map where we start off as a meetup and we start hosting community events that is where I came from in the Drupal community. We realized that through that community, we could affect legislation. And so we started doing research and we got the city's open data law passed. We fundamentally wrote this thing called the People's Roadmap to a Digital New York City, which is our manifesto, which I'll talk about in a minute. We structured ourselves as a nonprofit and are now hosting programs, annual programs, which I will end our presentation or work on. So what we do is that we have created a talent and career pipeline by educating CUNY undergraduate students, teaching them how to become members of our community, how to become civic hackers, how to use open source tools, how to use Slack, Google Docs, how to do project management. We then use and employ those same CUNY undergraduate students to perform research and build tools so that way we can strengthen and enhance our democracy. And lastly, we then take that whole experience, we turn that around to engage our community and to provide advocacy to improve technology opportunities, data opportunities, and really to hopefully get our government within the 21st century. So in our research and advocacy, as I said, we started off with this People's Roadmap to a Digital New York City. It resulted in 34 different proposals. We've been able to get around 14 of them introduced as legislation, and we've been able to work collaboratively with both sides of the aisle to get 9 new laws. Most of those laws really focus around open data and an ecosystem to support the open data initiatives, but also focus on getting government information online and accessible in human and machine readable formats. We've been doing research around understanding how technology is used within government. So if you take a look at our publication side, you can see how community boards, which are almost analogous to ANCs in DC, which are like little tiny community planning boards, use technology and data. And second, that research has helped us build the system and formalize a technology support system called Research and Data Assistance Requests. So we now use our CUNY fellows, which we call Civic Innovation Fellows, to help provide technical and research support to community boards, to elected officials and nonprofits. So you can go onto our website, fill out this screen door form. We basically ask you what is the impact, what's your timeline, and what are the data sources that you have, and demystify. As of today, we have 58 requests over the past year and a half. What they end up are primarily in reports, maps, and letters to agencies, kind of outlining new data collection processes, data sharing processes, the introduction of potentially new tools. From this, we've also been able to create new tools. So we have a 311 dashboard called WardStat. We've created a map that identifies and articulates all the various political boundaries inside of New York. We've created a map that also overlays liquor licenses, sidewalk cafes, and noise complaints through SLAM. Because our mission is really focused on empowerment and education and literacy, which is really at the core from my days at dealing with Drupal and working within the Drupal community. We've created a series of interlocking classes that help ensure that the people know about the data that's being collected on them. So we host and have created the city's first open data training course. It's a 4-part course that's Creative Commons. So if you're part of a city or if you're part of an agency and you want to figure out tactical tools on how to teach people the value of data or 5 key terms, sort, filter, group, count, and pivot, we have a practical curriculum that you can take and download and use as you wish. We've also created a framework so that way all of this literacy and these components of classes can be taught to other people. So we have a train the trainers curriculum that we put together. All of this education is fundamentally used within our fellowship program, which are CUNY undergrad students. As of this year, we've had 59 students from 10 CUNY schools across all 5 boroughs. The students themselves are overwhelmingly Black, Indigenous, or people of color. 49% of them have been women. We get them for 2 semesters. The first semester is the boot camp, which is based on the open source curriculum that I talked about, which is public. And then the second semester, we have them work on radars and build tools. I will skip through some of these things just for brevity. You can download the slides later on, but our success has led to a really in-depth partnership with our Department of Education. Sadly, the budget cuts due to COVID have tabled this particular program, but we have been able to take all of our work and really package it in to our ability to train and inspire young computer scientists. And so these are students from middle school and high school who come to us from across the city, who work through a 3-tier structure to be introduced to open data, to be able to use computer science principles to identify community problems that they then want to build solutions around. We then run them through an in-school design-a-thon. They then come to a borough-wide hackathon where they compete and they do wireframing and further enhance their computer science principles to compete against each other to see who can go to our citywide hackathon. And at the citywide level, 2 classes from middle school, 2 classes from high school, all compete from each borough to be the winners. Through this process, we every single year have been able to get 1,500 students introduced to open data and to think about using data and technology and computer science principles to address problems within their communities. It has helped us deepen our relationship with community-based organizations. Just once again for brevity, because I'm running out of time and I apologize. We continue to keep our core strength is within hosting a conference. We love bringing people together. I wish I could see all of your smiling faces for seeing, turning a conference into a birthday party. We celebrate the city's open data law on an annual basis, and we call it the School of Data. Before that, we used to call it Codegov, and before that, it was just a camp. This is a photo from our Codegov event, I believe in 2015. Right there in the middle is a face that you might recognize if you were part of the Drupal diversity and brings back to Jacob, who was working to build the Drupal Association. You might know him or might not know of him as the guy with the blue Drupal suit, who really focused on building community opportunity and infrastructure for within Drupal. And so when I heard that Fatima was heading off to DrupalCon and had gotten a job at boston.gov, and I said, you have to go talk to Jacob. You have to go find this guy who's wearing a blue suit with the Drupal logo all over it and introduce yourself as a friend of Noel's. And while Jacob was architecting and pulling the strings of the Drupal event, he made time to develop a relationship with Fatima and to bring her into our collective community. And I think that this quote from her interview that's on the Aquia blog, I think it's Women in Drupal, really speaks to our collective ideal of where we want the Drupal community to be. I think an ideal future is a Drupal community where everyone feels like they belong, and we can have hard conversations about finding ourselves within the Drupal community. And it's not just about representation for representation's sake. It's about making sure that we have power and access and agency into a diverse and beautiful open community that feels and supports each other. And so I leave that as, how do we move through these next few months and years ensuring that the core element of our Drupal community, which is supporting each other, whether it's through code or emotional support or mentorship, how do we ensure that that happens? I would love to know that, because this is a problem that the civic hacker community is also facing, and that I face on a daily basis as I think about how do we support our Civic Innovation Fellows here in New York City. So I apologize for going over, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to ask this question. Broader. I'm going to hand the microphone back to Kirsten, you the show.
Hi. You were breaking up there a little bit at the end, but I thought it went really well. If you have any questions for Noel, or also for Joseph after he speaks, please post them in the Slack and we can moderate them and get to those questions as soon as possible. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Great.
I'm here. Thankfully, all is good. Yeah, so thanks for having me today. Let me go ahead and get my slides up here.
While he's doing that, let me talk very briefly to introduce Joe. He works at Code.gov and did a really cool research project recently, which I participated in. And it's kind of cool to be able to have this full circle. If you'd like to see his slides, you can go to our website and check out his session link. He's already included his slides there.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, you weren't supposed to tell him that you're a part of the research. Shh, it's confidential.
Oh, that's right.
Well, there's one of 25 everyone will know. But that's okay. You did it, not me. So yeah, thanks for having me here today. Let me see if I'm on a 2-screen effort, so hopefully this will go smoothly. I'm going to talk. I'm Joe Castle, like Kristen said, and I'm actually, just a quick disclaimer, I'm here in my personal capacity. So I am an academic researcher and a open source developer. So that's what I like to do in my spare time. And I love to talk about open source software and open source research, and or research about open source software and all that good stuff. So coming to you from Maryland today, my beautiful home, and happy to be here. So this is my second year at Drupal GovCon. Attended last year, and this is my first year as a speaker. Sent in a keynote to talk about my study, which is the study was lengthy and the talk is lengthy. And I got a message back saying you're I think the first person who's ever submitted to do a keynote. Usually we find people to do keynotes. And oh, by the way, you need to cut it down a little bit. So, and rightfully so. So, so today I'm going to go through just a couple slides, hopefully about 15 minutes, and talk about open source software in the federal government and facets of that. So, specifically, I'm going to look at some history about software, computers, government-funded labs and things like that, and that'll be very brief. And then I'll go into some renewed efforts through policy with the Code.gov program, and then provide some insights into organizational factors that my study, or within the study, I looked at organizational factors that are affecting code publication, and so ultimately, for those that are interested, can publish and contribute and be part of a broader open source community as well. So there is a long history of federal government supporting computing and open source software. This relationship ebbed and flowed sort of through from the 1940s until now. Computers obviously have evolved in the 1940s to where government-funded academic institutions were put together in support of World War II. They were initially used for calculations to support artillery trajectories, and later helping for code breaking. A notable story of the time is with Grace Hopper's work at the Harvard Computational Laboratory. With a contract from the Navy, amazing Grace Hopper and her colleagues worked day and night innovating computer capabilities, producing advanced mathematical calculations. And this was seen as a precursor to open source software because Hopper and her colleagues at various academic institutions collaborated on collaborated on COBOL and basically compilers for COBOL. The computer industry continued to grow. Some of you may know this story, but a lot of the solutions that were coming out were proprietary and were often touted as being more functional, efficient, and secure. And so government and industry started to move away from open source software or just free and open computers and open software at the time. It wasn't actually called open source software at that time. Government and industry followed suit by buying computers with prepackaged software. Mainframes were that way initially, and then when we get to the personal computing era, then things change. However, some didn't want to follow the model of being only using proprietary software, proprietary computers, and so they believe that computers and software should be open for all to consume, modify, and share within a community. In the 1980s, the term and concept of open source software came to fruition, and it wouldn't be until about another 15 to 20 years until we would see it sort of a resurgence in backroom server computing and web technologies, both in industry and government. Today, both industry and government are pursuing open source software at a rapid rate. Many of us rely on open source in our daily lives for transportation, for entertainment of, on our televisions, mobile technologies, running websites and servers, and the government has followed suit with consumption and is in the early stages of publishing code or publishing open source software. In 2016, the White House issued the Federal Source Code Policy, or M1621, and this policy is actually sort of at the end of a long list of policies that focused more on acquisition and considering open source software in the process. This is the first policy that actually just takes open source software in and of itself, or accountability of software, and trying to release some of the basically create an inventory and then release some of it as open source. So basically this policy did three things. It said agencies, all cabinet level agencies must develop their own internal source code policy. They must update their acquisition language to capture new custom code, whether it's developed by a contractor or a federal employee. And they must inventory their agency custom code. The policy also established a program called Code.gov. It's a program for implementation of the policy to work with agencies and to help them, basically put their policies together and do inventorying and open sourcing. And then also within that, Code.gov created a website and an API. So the website's been up for three years now and continues to grow with code repositories. Code.gov today showcases 7,800 code repositories from 26 major agencies or 24 cabinet agencies, plus a couple others that find value in doing open source and inventorying and putting their code out. There are currently, I looked yesterday, there are currently 42 Drupal projects listed on the site. So I'm hoping with me being here, we can get some more Drupal projects up on the site as well. The audience for the platform consists of federal policy managers and developers inside and outside of government. We currently have a listserv of 650 plus members and a monthly community of practice meeting to discuss federal source code. By the way, if you are a government employee, a military member, or a contractor that works on a government contract, whether it's military or civilian contract, doesn't matter, you are welcome to join our listserv to have a sort of internal discussion about federal source code and open source software. We meet once a month on the third Thursday of the month and basically just run down what's happening with policy in code.gov and then do some demos and things like that. So feel free to reach out to me after this or on the side. Notable projects on the site currently include the Department of Energy has a software catalog, which also has many open source projects within that. We have the Code.gov platform, the US Web Design Standards is in there, and then also NASA has a nice software catalog, and there's much more as well. Code.gov also works with international digital service teams to establish their own Code.gov platform. So an interesting side note is that the Italian government reached out to us a couple years ago and asked us about our platform, the code itself, and then also the policy and implementation and all that good stuff. And so we've been working with them the past couple of years, and they've pretty much modeled after what we've done here in the United States, created a platform, developed policy, and now they're continuously building developer tools, and they're putting out more code repositories. Open tasks is a way for individuals to come to code.gov and get started in open source. So we did a community of practice meeting the other day, and someone asked me, how do I get started in government open source software? And I said, well, the easiest way is, the easiest way to find where the source code is to go to code.gov. And then if you really want to jump in, if you're a developer, designer, and you want to jump in, go to open tasks, and then just kind of see what's up there, run a search. You can search by agencies and languages and level of ability, if you will, and you could go and you can pick a task and you can contribute that way. But basically, pick a project, pick a community, and just dive in. So in presenting today, one of the things I wanted to do was provide an in-depth look at why some agencies publish open source software and others do not. And 3 years ago, I began a research study to investigate the implementation of the federal source code policy based on agency publication of open source software. And considering that every major agency has an IT budget and a staff relative to size and mission, yet few agencies were publishing, 3 years ago, were publishing open source software. I pretty much wanted to get a better understanding of why some agencies were publishing and others were not. And, taking out the mission factor and the capability factor and things like that, if we're all relatively the same across government, or every agency is relatively the same across government, then there's got to be some organizational factors, aiding or hindering the ability of an agency to publish software. So without getting too deep into organization theory, basically there are, I basically looked at 4 different organizational factors, and they were cultural beliefs, public engagement, structural dimensions, and organization location. And you can see at the bottom of the slide, you can see the participants. So we know one participant already. The others I will not tell you, but you can see at the bottom of the slide, you could go to the full study. We've also been pushing out, or I've been writing blog posts to, make it easier to swallow, if you will, or easier to read, shorter versions of the same sort of content, and pushing those out on Medium as well. So you can check that out. But basically the results of the study, without going into too much setup and the details, and we could be here for an hour or two. Basically the study came down to, looking at the 4 factors and then data around them and sort of, conclusions around that. So I'll walk through each one relatively quickly. And then just provide some implications real quick. So cultural beliefs, every organization has cultural beliefs. There's sub-organizations, there's, subcultures, countercultures, things like that. But basically they support, in making predictions and selecting actions. Beliefs are important for understanding what is enacted in, given particular situations. So non-monolithic means that all units share the same beliefs about publishing, or not all units share the same beliefs about publishing. And often there are subgroups that find it more beneficial for efficiency and financial purposes for publishing more software. So what I found early on in the study was that with culture is that these sort of one-off groups that were publishing more software as opposed to a whole agency, if you will. And it wasn't so much that they were going out and doing it on their own and didn't agree with, didn't follow, didn't have the same beliefs as the major component of the agency or the organization. But it's more or less that they were like, okay, those are really good things. However, we also want to do these additional things. And it was usually for some reason of like, modern software development practices, we want to save money, we know how to do this stuff. And so we, with cultural beliefs, those that ended up publishing more frequently, had similar beliefs to the parent organization. They just also took it a step further. For public engagement basically enables individuals to come together within a technical domain to ask questions and solve particular problems. So this usually means working with individuals that are outside of your office, your unit, your sort of little community of, your branch, your division, however you want to do that. But usually a small subset of working on one project, one program, and going outside of that within the broader agency, across agencies, with the public. Organizations that were publishing more frequently tended to engage and collaborate with more individuals, or collaborate with individuals outside their unit, often through various means. So attending an event like this today or this week, using varied methods of like Slack and Zoom, so electronic collaboration methods, and having one-off conversations or conversations with others outside of your office, outside of your normal context of it, of your work, your day, often resulted in publishing more software, more frequently publishing software. Structural dimensions include how organizations are socially structured, and considers centralization or decision-making, formalization, which are the rules and policies, differentiation, which is diversity of skills. So think in terms of diversity of, IT skills, program management skills, things like that. And then coordination, which is communication. Organization structure in response to environmental disturbances. So as new policies and technologies are created, and the organization has to find a way to implement those things, they tend to respond in a certain way. They staff a certain way. They work a certain way. Collaboration, no collaboration. There's certain tools that support that effort. So without getting too deep into organization theory, it should really just be noted that with dimensions, that policy permits publication of software, and not having a policy hinders other units from publishing software. What I thought going into the study was that if basically what I thought is that it was going to be the Wild West, right? You would go into an organization and the main agency would have a policy and say, here's our stance, here's what we do, here's what you can and can't do. And then I would go to a unit and I thought they would just be publishing whatever, right? It actually turned out that I went to a unit and they would say, the reason why we can actually do this is because the first thing we did was we created a policy around it. So we basically gave permission to our unit to publish, or our people to publish software. And if you think in terms of units like 18F, US Digital Service, there's some data folks at like EPA and software catalogs at Department of Energy. There's some units that have already put in place the structure, if you will, to publish software. And in all cases, that's what was needed to basically publish more frequently. The last thing, and then the other one was technical skills. So probably makes sense to most, especially on this broadcast. But obviously, you have to have some technical skills around software development and open source. There's a certain way to code, leaving for security and things like that. And it just makes more sense that you need some sort of code. So if units didn't have the specific skills and they were more policy or management oriented or other things, they tended to not have the capability or not be able to publish software. It's kind of makes sense. The study provided data for implications for public administrators and to publish more frequently. So specifically, managers have to consider competing interests. There's many policies, many things to do in a day. And so they have to ultimately consider, what's important and practical for the unit. So open source software isn't for everybody. I'm a huge open source advocate, and I can't believe I just said that previous statement about not being for everybody, but it's true. Not everyone is prepared to do open source software, to either participate in a community or publish their own software, or agencies publishing software, or even industry. If you go to industry and go to different conferences, and folks will show up from pretty big industry places, and they're doing some open source. Actually, I think if you look at GitHub today, I think some of the biggest publishers of software, are Microsoft and React was for a while, and of course Gatsby's up there now. But anyway, some of the bigger industry partners, not all those are industry partners, but some of the bigger industry partners are publishing more, but they're not publishing everything, and they're not publishing their most lucrative or proprietary. It's still proprietary. It just kind of makes sense. So you have to figure out what works for you. And then also you have to determine, or there needs to be sort of policy and skills in place to publish more software. And then finally, what's most important, and probably most important in general for general knowledge of whatever you work in, whether it's accounting or legal or computer science or whatever, most individuals will benefit from a collaborative atmosphere, and often working with those outside of their unit through in-person and electronic means. So going to conferences, doing things like this, I mean, obviously that's going to provide some benefit and help for growth and opportunity as well. So with that, I am pretty much finished. So I just want to say thank you for listening today, and I hope this was beneficial. And if you have any questions, I think we can do it now, or if we're out of time, I'll stay on after in Slack, and we can chat there.
Thank you, Joe. We are actually taking all the questions in Slack, so feel free to post any questions in the GovCon Slack. If you don't have the link, you can go to Twitter, and we have been posting the link to the Slack so that you can ask questions. In addition, I want to point out that tomorrow we will be hosting another keynote at noon. This time it's going to be with Sarah Cope from GSA, and she's going to talk about digging into user experience at any level. Yes, Joe does definitely know Sarah pretty well. So that's it for the day. Please ask any questions if you have some in Slack, and continue to enjoy your training. Thank you again, Noel and Joe. Really great information. Thanks, everyone.